Okay, let's take a look at GMT's Saints in Armor. I'm going to be doing the playthroughs, and I've started setting up White Mountain. Well, it's mostly set up, except the leaders, which I haven't put in place. And I think there's an error with this piece. They've got calves stacked with regular heavy infantry, which is illegal. But I realized I've never really given the series an intro. My first game of it, Gustavus Adolphus, Gustav Adolf the Great, that was very early. I did that very early in my videos, and I didn't give a rules introduction. I think I may have done a little play example in that, or in my next one, Nothing Gained But Glory. But I don't think I've given a full rules introduction. And to tell you the truth, although I kind of skimmed the rules and I've played This Accursed Civil War, one of the scenarios of that fairly recently, and explained it to my wife, I could use a refresher. So I know that Marco gave an overview of the game, which is probably better for most people, but I figure if I'm going to be giving myself a chance to look through the rules, hey, I might as well video it. It may catch something. It may be helpful to someone. It may not. That's life. Right. Okay. So this is, a tactical game in the musket and pike era, and it's a fairly detailed system, which handles firepower. It handles the differences of the weaponry and different styles from a lot of tactical games. Although it's your move and fire type game, it does have some interesting little aspects to it that have really made me fall in love with this series. And it's pretty much on permanent, buy whenever I see one of it. I guess if something really silly showed up, like NATO, the musket and pike game. But yeah, I mean, as long as it's covering battles that are of any interest, I mean, even buying the Scandinavian War stuff from Nothing Gained But Glory, it's a little less exciting to me, but this one in particular was actually the most exciting of the series to me in terms of I'm really interested in these early 30 Years' War battles, because there's a change coming over the way warfare is performed, and it happens in this early period. And you kind of see the battlefield in flux during this. Let me put aside this thick playbook. My God, lots of historical information. I mean, they went all out on a lot of the chromy stuff in it. I think in part because there aren't that many battles here. We've got only 6 battles. That sounds a little less than some of this series, but you still get a pile of battles. Now you can see this is a smaller map, and there are a couple on the other side. There's another small one. So in some ways, maybe some of the production was less, but you've got these. They started doing these plaids where they have the orders on them and maybe some extra information. Now they've got 1 per battle, and again, maybe because of the less number of battles. I would rather have more battles and have that on a cheap sheet, but I'm assuming that they're kind of running low on battles to fill things out in the series at this point. Okay, so let's look at the basic idea of the game. And you've got, let me grab my tweezers so that I can kind of point to things. Your regular units have a number of factors on them. Let's see what we got here. We've got, trying to remember, the strength point is this number here, the white number. Let's kind of zoom in. That's the morale. These are indications of which battle and which wing it's associated to. The wing's kind of important. To some extent, the coloring can give you a hint of that, but the coloring is really more the nationality of the units. So you'll see the left wing and the center wing here, and indeed the right wing, have units that look the same. So there's no easy distinguishment for that. You've got to kind of zoom in with your eyes and look real careful. That can be a problem because sometimes formations, especially cav formations, will get a little tangled up. The infantry tends to be a lot more stable. Your leaders, well, here we have a finished leader. This scenario starts off with leaders being finished, but here they have an indication of the unit, the battle, and they also have a modifier. Negative numbers are good, which affects morale, initiative, stuff like that. The game is beginning to feel a little bit overproduced in the sense that it comes with counters for these colonels, unnamed leaders, and now each battle is coming with its own unnamed leaders for each wing. It's getting a little ridiculous in my view in terms of this kind of stuff. And again, it may be because they're not putting as much in a single box as they used to. Or I'm not sure. I mean, let me take a look at what some of the older battles had. What did we say? Something like 6 battles in that one? Yeah, that's all we got in some of these others. That's 30 Years' War. This only has 5. So you're getting a pretty good deal here. You know, in terms of the overproduction issue, it isn't hurting what you're getting. You're also getting, if these are smaller battles, and most of them look like it when I look at the counter piles, and yeah, I know I'm not getting to the rules. Why am I doing that? Well, because I want to delay. You're getting a goodly number of the markers that you need to play the game. So you're probably not going to run out, is my guess. Certainly not in this battle, but I don't see any that look like really huge battles, and it looks like you have a decent number of markers. If you have any others of the series, of course, you can substitute. I understand not wanting to do that, really, but, you know, with a number marker or something, that's not a big deal. All right, well, let's go back. We have anything else on the field I want to deal with? All right, what about counters? Let's take a look at some of these markers that we're coping with here. Obviously, strength markers to indicate losses to units. Cavalry have these pistols that they use in fire. I'm a little confused. I have seen different types of cav showing up. We've got the arquebusiers and the cuirassiers. If I remember correctly, they're both armed with weapons. The arquebusiers just get a bonus on their fire, but I may be mistaken. We have a new type in here, these C-type, that are Croats. They're light cav, and they have their own little special rules. The new edition of the rules, the 6th edition, looks like it has a few changes. I see a few of these few places where it's kind of indicating like this. Hey, this is something new. You got to pay attention. My skimming of them convinced me that it's mainly to do with wagons and then some special stuff that fits this particular set of scenarios better. Although the Croats, there's an argument that, yeah, they were actually used in some of the other games. They were just treated as arquebusiers there, and, you know, not making that differentiation. You have indications of salvo fire, which is sort of a massed fire that will reduce your effectiveness after you fire it, but your first fire will be stronger. Hedgehog for sort of a rudimentary square. Limbering for guns, disabled captured markers. Markers for column open order. Then we got these combined markers, which I think is kind of a clever thing. This game uses a lot of counters on a single hex. So you got markers that'll say, oh, your pistols are down and your formation's broken. Formation's broken and your morale is shaken. And we got a few of these. When you do interceptions, you have to mark when you actually do them, or if you fail, they possibly get marked, and these get marked to indicate that you're doing that you did a momentum move. We also have continuation markers. It looks like they erred and didn't backprint the bypassed on all of these. That's probably not too big a deal. You won't have many cases of that, but only one of them is. And you also have orders markers. One of the key factors of this game is, unlike, say, Great Battles of History, more like something like Hastings 1066 that I remember from the past, you have to assign orders to your units, and then you have to kind of roll to get them to switch orders. So you might be in a charge order and not be able to pull your troops back in time. And then they could attack where you don't expect them to. All right, so our basic sequence of play here is an initiative phase where you essentially, I believe, roll to see which player gets Oh, no, 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 that's right. Yeah. So it's based on the overall stance of the army. So whoever has the most formations that are in the highest stance has the initiative. So if you've got all your formations charging and the other guy doesn't, you will have the initiative. Now that doesn't really matter, because what initiative really determines is you have to make your action first, and the actions kind of go in order. So charge is the highest related action. All the units that are charging go first. After that, make ready is the next highest, then receive charge, and then finally rally. And somewhere or another, this one actually came with all these extra sheets, right? But what it didn't come with, although if you're a fan of the series, you'll have these, is it did not come with as many player aids as I think the others did. This comes with one player aid card with all the tables in it, and then one orders card that gives you the information that you need to pay attention to there. That has the artillery fire table, which is also on here in the range. I don't know why stuff is... So the reproduce stuff in here, this used to... The extra space on there used to be where they kept the orders boxes. In each of these scenarios, they have on these special charts, they have some special rules both for Saints in Armor in general, which are listed here. And these are the big differences with the game. Artillery can never limber. And I've got to make sure... Right now I have my artillery all unlimbered. I got to make sure I don't want to move it, because it can start the game limbered, but once it unlimbers, it can never limber again. Because the firing crew leaves the field, to tell you the truth. Well, not the firing crew, but the transportation crew for the gunners, for the gunnery. The whole artillery at this point was probably mainly non-military people. They were specialists, and the transportation crew would be hired specially, and they wouldn't be in the military, and they'd want to get off the field before the battle started. There's no salvo fire in the scenarios for this. Cuirassiers are the only troops that get a bonus for momentum in a charge attack. In some of the other scenarios, well, in all of the other games, pretty much any cav, when it's charging, got a bonus. I think maybe the lights didn't. But now, only the cuirassiers are considered heavy in terms of their shock value. Because it wasn't until Gustavus started using cav as a heavy arm, as a heavy charge arm, that it was really common. These, what are they? The arquebusiers or whatever. These are guys with carbines who are doing the I can't remember what it's called, where they the carousel, where they ride up and fire and then ride back to the back, and they're just turning around in the circle, keeping continuous fire up that way. Heavy infantry with 21 or more strength points are going to be worth more victory points at the end of the game. There are some heavy units in this game. The feeling there is that these were rare and very, very valuable, and they would have a heavier victory point gain or loss. We also have special rules for White Mountain itself, and each of the scenarios has its own special rules listed here. That may not be all of them, however. And then you've got a terrain effects chart. Any special terrain effects are listed here, but I think they are also listed back here on a combined terrain effects chart. So you're getting more, more play aids and stuff, and that's great. I guess these are popular enough that they're able to put up a big enough print run that they can afford to put some goodies in for us. Okay. Because it does look like you're getting a good deal, a good number of games in it. So after initiative phase is really just which guy goes, okay? There is a tiebreaker, however. If everybody's got the same number of wings at the highest order, then it's based on the best wing commander under that. And the person with that best wing commander will have the right to command orders. So the basis of the game then is you're going to be alternating turns within each order group. So all the charges go first. If I have more charges than you, I get to launch a charge first. And then we just alternate back and forth until, well, we can't violate that best order thing. So let's say I have all my units charging and you have none of yours charging. Well, all of my commands get to activate before any of yours do. But on the other hand, we try to alternate within that situation. So if I had one just charged and I'm out of charging units and we're heading down to make ready, well, if you have any in make ready, you get the next initiative there. For activation, you activate the wing, and there's a sequence of things that happens when you activate a wing, and yeah, I know I'm probably screwing this up terribly. I can hear it in my voice. But what you basically do is your first thing might be to try to change the orders. You roll an attempt to do that on the table if you wish, or if you're happy with your orders, you go in. And each of these orders has restrictions that you have to follow. For example, charge has to move closer to the enemy. Make ready, I believe, cannot move adjacent to the enemy. Receive charge can only move 1 hex. And rally, well, rally I don't think can move. I'm not sure. I don't rightly remember. No, it has full movement, but it can't move any closer to the enemy ever. So you've got all this kind of spelled out in here, and that's kind of useful. And actually, I'm not going to try to remind myself of the entire rules when I do this, because that's just going to be problematic. Because it is a thick old rule book, 32 pages here, but most of it is covered here, and I don't feel like I really need to read most of it, although I do need to kind of remind myself of things. Facing, as you can see, is towards the hex points. You got these double-sided units, which are facing towards the points. They're a little weird because, for example, if you want to turn them, you actually have to wheel them. I think there's an about-face rule, though, there. Yeah, 180 degrees costs you 2 movement points. They're saying you don't actually about-face, you're actually wheeling the unit more severely. You've got certain formations like the hedgehog, etc., which you can enter. And that prevents you from firing, moving, most things here. And if you're fired on, you receive a penalty there. We'll take a look at how that works in a little bit. You can expend movement to do this, but you can also do it as a reaction to an enemy unit moving. So if cavalry moves onto you, or next to you, you can throw up a hedgehog from that. And in fact, if they come from behind, you must try to. But that requires a morale check to do. Movement points not written on the counters. It's covered in here. It's not too bad, except, well, you got to kind of remember the different movement point costs. It's basically, though, the heavy infantry 4, and everything else goes 6. Wagons and guns go 2. That sounds slow. Okay, so the different actions that you can, the different things you can make your actual units do are listed based on the orders. So for example, firing, everything can fire, but unless you're doing a charge, you can't do something called advancing fire, which fire combat in this is kind of interesting. You have a number of different kinds of fire that are mixed with movement or not. And we'll hit that discussion a little later. I think I've already gone over all this actually in another series, but we'll try to get it in an intro. So reforming units is trying to improve their formation level. So in some cases, like if you move through crappy terrain, you're going to be taking formation hits, and those show up as the first effect of that is the unit is flipped over to a formation shaken side. Okay, and that'll give you some penalties. And then after that, if they take another hit, they have the formation broken, which is this marker, and on its backside, it's mixed with one with a morale shaken hit. So you have to worry about, the game actually covers both morale and the formation, like some of the more detailed minis games will. And I think that's kind of nice to see finally showing up in a board game. I know some people have said things about minis being simpler. I don't think they're looking at the right minis. Some of the minis games are quite complex, and to me it seems like most of the inputs been going from minis to board games all along, even though other people, maybe the most popular minis games are all very simple, but I've certainly hunted out for more complex things and found the complexity showing up in the minis first. Okay, so let's see. Reforming is going to allow you, under the conditions, to get your units into better formation status, but in Make Ready, you can only do it if you're with a leader. And likewise with Rally, you can't do that at all. In Receive Charge, you can only do it if you're stacked with, I think Next to might work too. I'd have to look that up. Rally, however, allows you to rally all your units. And rallying the units, damned if I remember how that works. Pretty sure it uses a roll. Yeah, it's been a while since I've played. So when you do a rally action, it's automatic if you're with your wing commander. Otherwise, you have to make a morale check. You get a modifier if the wing commander is adjacent to you, and if you get equal to or less than your current morale. Now, this is an issue. Your current morale, when your morale is broken, is 1. So that's fairly difficult to do. This is using 10-sided dice and zeros or zeros, so you have some chance of doing it, but in general, you want your leader there to rally your broken units so that you don't lose them. Because if they fail to rally, they run off the board and they count against you. They end up over here in the dead box. The pursuit box is for cav that chase units off the board. That's a possible effect when you're hitting the close combat table, and you can see here, check for cav pursuit, and then you'll be rolling on here, and based on what you're doing, charge orders, momentum, stuff like that, you end up having more of a chance of pursuing the enemy off the board. And yeah, I'm not going to go through the whole of the rules here, mainly because I'm not really fully comfortable with them, and it's also a long sequence, and I think I've done most of it in one of the other videos. Okay, so when you activate, so the first thing that happens when you activate a new unit is your opponent has an option to try to preempt that unit, and they use this continuation and preemption table on preemption based on their order and any modifier from their leader. Okay, and once you finish an action, you'll be rolling for continuation if you wish. Then you make your attempt to change the orders. Then you actually perform your actions, and your actions are mixed into move, move and fire. The artillery can only fire, and the rally and reform actions. Then if you're adjacent, I think it's an option to attack in close combat. I don't think it's required. I may be wrong. Maybe mixing this up with the Great Battles of History. Yeah, it's optional. And every unit in front of you, I believe, has to be attacked, kind of like the Great Battles of History type stuff. That can be a problem for 2-hex units, I think, and I'll have to look that up to see how that works. Yeah, I know, this isn't interesting. Great. Okay. Now, the close combat, when it's actually resolved, will be resolved on the close combat table, and it's based on the different weapons types, making a quick comparison. And you get a modifier. You also get some other modifiers here based on morale differential, the strength point differential, odds, whether or not you're firing pistols with the cavalry. They can fire pistol both as the attacker and as the defender. Hitting from flank, positional advantages. This all comes in, and you want a big plus, and on a big as the attacker, and a big minus as the defender. And you basically have a chance to do damage to the opponent. That damage can be a combination of morale as well as actually eliminated the unit is possible. I think whenever you can engage in close combat, you at least become shaken. I know the formation gets reduced a little bit. I'm not sure if that happens no matter what. I'm not sure if... I think you actually can break. If you're shaken already, you break when you take it, but I can't be positive about that. So, there are some interesting changes in this set of rules. Beyond the artillery there, they added... Oh, there's errata for a lot of the different games and some additional counters for them. So, actually, some of those counters replaced some of the old replacement counters. This is beginning to feel like the Great Battles of the American Revolution game, which had that issue. Alright, I'll come back in a bit. Okay, and so one of the things I was mentioning before was continuation. When you're done with your activation, you can roll again, and again modified by your leadership rating and some other things, and see whether or not you're going to get... another chance to activate with that unit. Now that can still be preempted, and that's often kind of a good thing, because if you preempt something before it goes, it gets this little bypass marker, and it's going to get a go again. But if you preempt something after it's had one activation, this is very much like Great Battles of History, and then it gets a continuation, you stop that continuation and it doesn't get another go, which is kind of cool. The problem is there's a cost to failed attempts to preempt, which is notably you will get a no continuation marker on yourself if you make a failure. And if you fail a second time, you'll be finished. You won't get a chance to go yourself. So you got to kind of use it with quite a bit of respect. Because, yeah, your leaders, no matter how good they are, aren't going to have a great chance of a preemption or well, continuation doesn't really matter in this, but a preemption. They're not going to have a tremendous chance. Even the best leaders on a charge with a preemption, only on a 0 through 6 will you succeed. I don't think there are any -3s kicking around. There are a decent amount of -2s. There may be, and Gustavus may have been, I don't know, but I don't think so. But what that means is you've got a decent chance of failing. In something like Great Battles of History, you usually had a good chance of preempting with the elite leaders of the era. You don't have that here. You don't have that kind of flexibility to command the battlefield. So you want to be a little careful. All right. And then at the end of the turn, routed units that are still routed will start heading off the board. If they leave the board, they go into the destroyed box. And then some of the markers are removed. Salvos, fired artillery, finished leaders. You're just basically doing some cleanup and mechanical stuff here. The fire table is kind of cool. One of the things I was mentioning was you have multiple types of fire in this game. In particular, obviously, you have your different types of weapons. But let's take a look at the infantry fire, which in particular is interesting. And you have, let's see, 3 different types of infantry fire. Advancing fire, where you move forward a hex, and then you fire with a penalty of -3 to fire at the enemy in one of your front hexes. And then, after you fire, the enemy gets to react, which could be a better firing shot because he's not going to have that -3 on him. Likewise, there's a retreating fire, which allows you to pull back 1 hex and fire with a retreating fire modifier. I think the retreating fire actually happens the hex before you retreat. And again, you take the -3. There... Is there a reaction? There would be no reaction fire, is there? Eligible units may react, though if they reaction fire, they also use the -3 retreating. Oh no. Yeah, so the reaction there would be penalized as well because you're kind of pulling back. You're not charging forward in the same way. And then skirmishing is when you're standing next to the unit, you just fire straight at it. But if the target survives, he can make fire back. And there you don't have the penalty, so once you're in place against the enemy, you can start trading shots at a pretty hefty rate. The firepower is going to be with a 10-sided die again, so it can have quite a heavy variance in the effects. And what you end up doing, a bunch of modifiers here, mainly by status of the unit, but it's also important whether or not you're a heavy infantry or heavy infantry with regimental artillery. I doubt anything in this has regimental artillery. I think those are pictured with a little cannon on them, and I don't see any examples of it here. This is an early battle. Later battles will have that. That's obviously much more potent in terms of the damage and formation hits and everything that it does. Artillery fire is done based on a range. Now this game, I believe, has some bigger guns in it that aren't covered in here, and I'll have to... Yep, here they are. So we have some bigger guns, this 26 to 48 pound guns that have a longer range. Not really more effect. A little bit more. Yeah, they're a little more effective. And the bigger thing, though, is that they go out to a further range. And the further out you are in range, the more penalties you have there. Those heavy guns have a special restriction on them. I'm trying to remember if that's covered in this. I think it's got to be in this rule book, the playbook. What they don't get the bonus for firing directly into the hex in front of them. And I think that'll be represented here. There's no real excitement there. Okay. And let's see. You also have your light infantry and cav, which fire on this table. Those will be your musketeers. We have some of them kicking around on top of the cannons. I got to figure out if they go on top or below. I don't remember quite how this handles it. I think they have to go below. I think basically they're there to provide melee defense rather than any additional firepower. But they will fire on the same kind of table as cavalry pistol do. And then there's a series of modifiers there, some of which is based on the strength of the units. Unlike these don't really worry about the strength of the units, although casualties reduce your firepower. So a unit, no matter what it is expected to put out enough fire to do damage. But as it takes casualties, it starts taking penalties to its firing chances. So that's each casualty point loses one. Now there tends to be a certain balance within the units, but I think the feeling is that those bigger units don't really have more muskets in them. They just have more pike for the most part. Let's see what else. Yeah. Formation changes the movement, so if your formation's broken or something, you end up taking a different movement. We also have the open order, which allows you to go over rough terrain. I found that very necessary in the Scanian games. That was the designer, who was also the designer of this, as opposed to the original designer, kind of yelled at me because I was not taking advantage of the swiftness of my forces enough. This battle looks pretty set piece. However, all the ridges here, I don't see them. Those may just be the elevation changes are considered steep, which I believe causes problems. If we see somewhere, there's a movement chart. Oh yeah, here we go. So let's see. Steep slopes are going to cause a formation hit against everything except light infantry. So anything else has got to go into open formation if it wants to do much moving, or else it's going to take formation hits for moving along any of these contour lines, and that's kind of troublesome. We'll look more into how this particular battle is going to be going, because there are some special rules for each of the scenarios in this one. The concept of salvo fire doesn't apply to this game, but it's basically this bonus you can take that penalizes the rest of your fire that turn, and it's marked with a little mark. The bonus is mainly that you do more morale hits to the opponent. Let's look at the specials for this scenario, or for this game, not the scenario itself. A huge, huge book of these too. 56 pages on the playbook. Wow. Okay, so our special rules here, let's see what we have. We have the Croat cavalry, which, like light infantry, they're not going to be taking hits from terrain. They have a special anti-suicide clause, which light infantry have in this too, where they don't have to move adjacent to a heavy infantry unit. They have 8 movement points and use cav movement point rules for the most part. They can force heavy infantry into hedgehog. They can use pistols in close combat and fire. And they're worth less victory points. And then we have this modifier to the close combat matrix, which I believe will cover them. That's not included in here. So this is kind of a little irritating, is that, okay, we have it here. The base charts, which are not versioned, they include it. They do not include the Croat cav. So the Croat cav you'd have to look up specially, and they'll be over here on the back of this, as well as in the rule book itself. The heavy artillery, we already talked about them a little bit. They're treated otherwise as the 12 to 24 pounds. And then Protestant command, for most of these scenarios, they don't have an army commander. But as an added option, they allow you to take the primary wing commander for the battle. Which should be listed somewhere, but it's not clear. It's got to be in the scenario rules for the battles themselves. Who is the overall Protestant commander, if there was one? And you use this little army command, wing command marker to indicate which functionality they're taking. And they can leave their wing uncommanded. That's a problem. I think it's a 1-hex movement, nothing offensive type of situation, in order to perform the actions of the army commander. And in general, you would never want to do this. So they kind of simplified it and said, if you don't want to bother with that, just leave him as a wing commander. You have no army commander, and deal with it. Both a perfectly reasonable rule. Now, actually, in White Mountain, there is not going to be an overall commander because things are just so dissolved for this battle. And that's why I didn't remember seeing it from the other. Anyway, I'm really excited to give this a shot. I'm going to have to look up online and see where these guys are supposed to be. I don't know which one. I suspect this one is in the wrong place, but in the scenario instructions, that's where he's listed. So maybe there's some errata online. Otherwise, I don't know what I'll do, because that's illegal. You can't have 2 units stacked together, except you can have commanded muskets stacked with cav, and you can also have infantry stacked with artillery, which is a second allowance. All right, let's upload this. And yeah, I'm sorry if it's not the best of introductions. Probably not going to post this intro directly to Consim World, actually, but I haven't given an intro to one of these, rightly so I felt like I should probably make one. But I kind of had the same reaction that I did when I started reading the rulebook, was, I know most of this. Once I start playing it, I'll understand it. I don't want to read it all again. And I think that's pretty much true. Most of it is actually on the charts, and that's not an easy way for me to digest things ahead of time. There are a couple of things I'll have to look up. But for the most part, it is a very detailed system. For such a detailed system, the play aids, etc., have made it much, much easier, I think, to approach than, say, SPQR. Even though I think it may be more detailed. Anyway, we'll give this a playthrough and see what we're getting. We'll go through all the scenarios. No question there.